When a person accesses case management services in the state of Florida, that person does not relinquish any of his or her rights. This presentation will explain the client's rights and responsibilities while receiving behavioral health services. These rights and responsibilities are defined in Florida statutes at FS 381.026, called the Patient's Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. The Agency for Healthcare Administration and the Department of Children and Families have developed a summary of these rights and responsibilities. This lesson consists of watching this PowerPoint slideshow and reviewing the attached documentation. Attached to this lesson are a copy of the slideshow, the Florida law regarding rights and responsibilities, and the summaries developed by the Agency for Healthcare Administration and the Department of Children and Families. After reviewing all of the attached material, you are required to complete the attached quiz with a score of at least 70% in order to complete this lesson. The first right that we want to talk about is the right for individuals who are receiving services to be informed of their rights and responsibilities in writing. Most agencies accomplish this responsibility to inform their clients by developing some type of a handout that is given to the individual, usually during the intake process. To document that the individual has received the information, most agencies require the client to sign that they have received the information. The next right is the right to freedom from discrimination. Behavioral health services and service providers are governed by all of the federal and state anti-discrimination laws. I want to draw attention to 3 of the sections on the prohibition of discrimination in the Department of Children and Families discrimination policy. First, the policy defines prohibited behavior specifically, stating, "No person shall, on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, sex, religion, disability, or political beliefs, shall be excluded from participation in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to unlawful discrimination under any program or activity receiving or benefiting from federal financial assistance and administered by the department." Second, the DCF policy prohibits retaliation against any person who files a discrimination complaint, specifically stating, "No person shall be retaliated against, harassed, intimidated, threatened, coerced, or discriminated against for making a charge, testifying, assisting, or participating in any manner in an investigation, proceeding, or hearing, or for opposing alleged unlawful discriminatory practices prohibited by this policy or related state, federal laws, rules, and regulations." Finally, the policy discusses limitations based upon a person's disability, specifically stating, providers may not treat an individual different from others in determining admission, enrollment, quota, eligibility, membership, or other requirement or condition which must be met in order to receive any aid, benefit, or service provided. It goes on to state the exclusion of persons without disabilities from the benefits of a program limited by federal statute or executive order to persons with disabilities, or the exclusion of a specific class of persons with disabilities, is not prohibited. The next right is the right to be treated with dignity and respect. Dignity and respect are basic human rights that, regardless of the circumstance of the individual, they do not give up these basic rights. I want to talk about a couple of ways that we can demonstrate dignity and respect in our work. First, we want to treat each person as an individual. I might say treat each person as a person, not a client, not a patient, not a diagnosis. We treat each person with the belief that beneath all of our circumstances, we are all just people. Second, we want to maintain the privacy of the persons that we serve. While there are other trainings in this series regarding privacy and confidentiality, what we are talking about here is a simple respect of the person's privacy. Working in the community, case managers must always be aware of where they are and who is around when working with the individuals they serve. Third, we need to show respect for the diversity in cultures and values of the individuals we serve. We can take an approach where we allow the persons we serve to educate us about what is important to them in their culture and their values. Fourth, we want to remember to promote the independence of the individuals that we serve. We want to be aware not to engage in any behaviors that create a dependency on us, but rather we want to empower those we serve. Finally, we want to recognize and respect the power that comes with our roles with the individuals that we serve, and never abuse that power in any way. Finally, on this slide, the individuals that we serve have the right to reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. While we normally think of the Americans with Disabilities Act in an employment situation, the Act also provides protections to individuals receiving services. Specifically, where it is reasonably possible, service providers should seek to find a way to provide the services in spite of a person's disability, rather than finding a way to refuse services because of a disability. Individuals that we serve have the right to be served in the least restrictive environment possible, and with the services that are believed to have the highest chance of providing benefit to that person. What this means is that we want to provide voluntary services unless involuntary services are absolutely required. We want to provide outpatient services where possible, as this is less disruptive to the individual and his or her life than inpatient services. But we also have the responsibility of asking the question, what is the best strategy to provide the individual the best possibility of achieving his or her goals from the services that we provide? Services should not be provided just because they are available or that they are something that our agency does. Services should be provided because they will help the person accomplish what he or she wishes to accomplish. Individuals have the right to an individualized assessment of their needs. Normally, this process is accomplished through the completion of a biopsychosocial assessment and a strengths-based assessment. This assessment process should be more than just answering a bunch of questions on a form to be put in the chart. The assessment process should have two goals. First, finding out what is really important to this person, and second, finding out what the person wants to accomplish with the services that he or she receives. As part of the intake and introduction process to the services that will be provided, staff members need to inform persons receiving services regarding what, if any, cost there will be for the services. Additionally, the staff members are required to disclose the process of how these fees for services are determined. If the organization uses any type of payment plans, these need to be described to the individual as well. And finally, on this slide, the patient has a right to have a particular staff person or a particular team assigned to his or her case. Individuals receiving services have a right to know who is providing services for them and how to contact that person or the team in a non-emergency situation. Individuals also have a right to know who to contact and how in the case of an emergency. Individuals receiving services have a right to have services start within a reasonable time period. Unnecessary delays need to be avoided. If there is going to be a significant delay in providing the services for the individual, staff members have a responsibility to contact the individual to discuss other services, including those from other providers, that are available in the interim before the requested services can start. Individuals receiving services have a right to information about the programs in which they are participating and any decisions that the program may make that affect their participation in the program. Individuals have a right to be informed about what the program provides and what the rules of participation are. This right is as simple as the fact that individuals receiving services have a right to know when their provider is unavailable or needs to reschedule services. But this right can be as complicated as the right to understand decisions that would limit or terminate services and the right to understand and use the grievance process. We previously discussed the importance of an individualized assessment. Individuals receiving services also have a right that the individualized assessment is used to produce an individualized service plan. Way too often, a service plan is something the service provider completes and gives to the person receiving the services to sign. Too frequently, the service plan is just a checklist of services that are going to be provided. An individualized service plan seeks to identify exactly what the person wants to accomplish from using the services, and these accomplishments should address things that are important in this person's life. The plan should be real, alive, and should address what the person receiving services wants. Additionally, individuals receiving services have a right to have these plans reviewed on a regular basis. Typically, the frequency of these service plan reviews is specified in regulation, but the service provider also needs to remember to review and update the plans when there are significant changes for the individual. Finally, on this slide, individuals receiving services have a right to services in a location that is comfortable, clean, and safe. As case managers who will be working in the community, we need to allow that people that we serve may define what is clean and comfortable for them differently than we may define it. The one place where the service provider may need to set limits is on safety, as all of us, providers and persons receiving services, need to assure that we are safe in the community. Individuals receiving services have a right to refuse any service unless that service is subject to the involuntary treatment provisions of Florida law or the service has been ordered by a court. Individuals may refuse parts of treatment and have the right to continue in the parts of treatment where they wish to continue. However, as treatment providers, we have the responsibility to inform the individuals receiving services of the consequences of refusing a service, including in those situations where refusing services may lead to the person's situations becoming worse. Individuals who are receiving services have the right to be discharged or to complete services when their service plan goals have been met or when they have achieved maximum benefit from the services they are receiving. Aside from violation of program rules, individuals should not be discharged for not completing service goals, for resistance, or for non-compliance. These things simply indicate that the service plan likely needs to be revised. However, when the person has completed what he or she stated that he or she wanted to complete, the service provider should move to completion. We cannot keep a person in services simply because we like them or that they like us, or we've been providing services to them for a long time. Services need to be focused on concrete goals, and when these goals are completed, the services should be completed. Finally, on this slide, individuals receiving services have a right to be informed of and to use community-based support programs. If these community-based support programs are something that the person wants to do, service providers may not act to discourage this participation or to disparage those community programs. Providers have a responsibility to be knowledgeable about what kinds of support programs are available in their communities and to maintain a positive working relationship with those organizations. As case managers, we will not be involved in the prescribing of any medications. However, we may be referring individuals that we serve to medical practitioners who may be prescribing medications. Case managers should be aware of the responsibility of the prescribing individual to inform individuals receiving services about the medications that they are prescribed. If a person that we are serving has questions about their medications, we should not attempt to answer those questions. Rather, we should refer the individual back to the prescriber with those questions. As with any other form of treatment, individuals have the right to refuse medications unless the medication is subject to the involuntary treatment provisions of Florida law or the medication has been ordered by a court. It should be noted that court-ordered medication happens very rarely. If the agency for which you work has any policy that prohibits the use of tobacco at agency facilities and properties or restricts it in any way, such as smoke-free environments, the individual receiving services has a right to be informed of these policies. This notification is normally completed at intake or introduction to a program and is usually outlined in the program rules. Each individual participating in a program has the right to express complaints regarding any violation of the rights that we have presented here. On the PowerPoint, agencies within Florida that would accept complaints and their phone numbers are listed. I will note that the phone number for the Department of Children and Families is the Tampa Regional Office. If you are working in a different region, the complaint should be filed with the local regional office. In addition to the right to register a complaint with any of these outside agencies, individuals receiving services have a right to register a complaint with the organization that is providing the services. Organizations must provide information about this complaint or grievance process to the persons receiving services, and the organizations must respond to any complaints that they receive in a timely fashion with no adverse action against the individual filing the complaint. Any individual who believes that he or she has been abused, neglected, or exploited while receiving treatment should make a report to the Florida Abuse Hotline, and the number for this hotline is provided on the slide. Providers of services have the responsibility to provide information to persons receiving services of the availability of this hotline and how to use it. While there is a separate training that includes mandated reporting, if a provider of services comes to believe that an individual receiving services, if that individual is a child or a vulnerable adult, that they believe that person is being abused, neglected, or exploited, the service provider is required to file a report with the Florida Abuse Hotline. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act gives persons receiving services certain rights regarding the medical record and any personally identifying information contained therein. Individuals receiving services have the right to review their medical records and to obtain copies of them after a written request is submitted. Service providers may be present when the individual is reviewing the record to explain any information contained in the record. Service providers have the right to redact, but not remove, information from a record before it is reviewed if the provider believes that the information would be harmful to the individual receiving services. Individuals receiving services have the right to enter amendments, notes, or other observations or comments into the medical record at any time. These comments must be included with any disclosure of the individual record to an outside agency. HIPAA regulations permit the release of information without a patient consent for treatment, payment, or other healthcare operations, as long as the individual is notified of this allowable release. Individuals receiving services have the right to request a restriction or limitation on the information that is released under this section of the HIPAA law. Additionally, individuals receiving services may request to limit the persons to whom information is disclosed. While the law permits these disclosures, the effect of this right is that the individuals receiving services can request that certain information not be released, or that certain individuals not receive information. Individuals have the right to request that confidential communication with them be made by an alternative means or at an alternative location. For example, an individual receiving services may request that any information be mailed to an address that is not his or her home address. Another example would be that the individual requests that no mail be sent to them and that all communication to them from the agency be sent by email. And finally, related to HIPAA, individuals receiving services have a right to know what information has been disclosed and to whom. Therefore, it is critical that we maintain a record of any release of information that has been made, and that the record include to whom the release was made and what information was released. Any list of rights for any individual also comes with a set of responsibilities. These responsibilities are also included in the Florida statutes and the guidance documents from ACA and from DCF. The first responsibility for the individual receiving services is to actively participate in their service, as defined in their service plans. In order for any service to be effective, the individual receiving the service must be engaged in that service and actively participating. As I said earlier, if the person is not doing these things, it is likely that the service plan needs to be revised. Individuals receiving services are also responsible to make payment for any costs for services that were disclosed to them when they initiated services. While in many service organizations, individuals cannot be dismissed from services simply for failure to pay, payment for services remains an obligation for the person served. Individuals receiving services have the responsibility to attend their scheduled meetings or to cancel those meetings with as much notice as possible. From my experience, no-shows for scheduled meetings is an indication of lack of engagement or lack of interest in the services. Individuals who are successfully engaged and invested in their services look forward to the scheduled meetings and actively manage those appointments. And finally, while we as service providers have a responsibility to treat all of the individuals that we serve with dignity and respect, those individuals we serve also have a responsibility to treat others, including other individuals served and the agency staff members, with dignity and respect. This concludes our presentation for today. Please take some time to download the material in the Lesson Media section of this lesson and review that material. When you feel that you're comfortable with the material, you may take the quiz that is attached to this lesson.